that good enough? You can see? Yeah, good. We don't have a lot of slides, but we might as well have them visible to everybody as we're going. I also see that we have about 17 people here, and I was thinking that it's a small group, and if you'd help me a little bit by reading the verses that show up on the screen, I'd really appreciate it. And instead of just being random, maybe so we can prepare, we'll start with in the back corner with Shirley, and then just work our way up. And if you don't want to do the verse, just shake your head and we'll move on. We won't make anybody do anything, but it'll just have a little bit of participation. And then the other thing is, if you want to say anything, if you want to add something, you know, it's a familiar story, so I'm more than happy to add anybody that wants to jump in here to say something. So we're going to talk today about encouragement in our battle, and we find our message in Exodus 17. So we're going to go there, if you want to turn in your Bible to it. And I also have it up on the screen. I don't know if it's easy enough to read up there, but we'll start again with Shirley doing it. But before we do that, maybe we'll just bow our heads and have a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we love you, we honor you, and we want to give you praise and glory. We don't want to be like entitled children that ask you for everything and just want. We know that you've already done enough for us, that whatever you've given us is enough. But your word says that we can ask you for things. And so we come to you asking for the things that we need in our battle. We know that there are many of us and our friends and our family that have many things that we're praying for. We're praying for our children, we're praying for our health or our family's health, and we're also praying for relationships where we need healing. We want to not just survive in this life, but we want to flourish, and we know that you can do that for us. So we come to you, and we just want to know that we are men and women who want to be not only hearers of the word, but doers also. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. So we'll start with Shirley, and we'll just go through these 9 verses.
One on the other on the other. Hands were steady. Son. And Joshua discomfited Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. And the Lord said unto Moses, Write this for a memorial in a book, and rehearse it in the ears of Joshua. Oh, I'm supposed to stop. I'm sorry.
That's okay. You're doing a good job.
I was going to go to the end.
Here. Do I point it that way? Okay. We'll see if we get the next slide up here. If not, I'll get Riston to move it ahead. Thank you. Oh, we'll keep going.
Keep going now?
Yep, for sure.
Okay, verse 13.
Yep.
And Joshua discomfited Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. And the Lord said unto Moses, Write this for a memorial in a book, and rehearse it to Joshua. For I will utterly put out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. And Moses built an altar and called the name of it Jehovah Nissi. Said, God hath sworn, the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation.
Perfect. Thank you. That was very good. Okay, so this passage in Exodus, and it encourages me, especially with the way that it ends. Is my banner. So when it comes to our own battle and we feel like we can't rest and we can't be rejuvenated before the next battle comes, so we can stake into the ground at the end of it all, wave that banner and say, Jehovah Nissi, the Lord is my banner. Thank you, Shirley, for reading. That was very good. So I had a time in my life when we had battles, and I'm including Alex in this, but it felt like these my battles that I just couldn't get. It started on July the 8th of 2023, and we came to church on a beautiful morning, Brianna and Alex, and we had a great morning. It was sunny. It was a beautiful. I hadn't driven, or Alex was driving, and out to pass the left-hand passing lane. The truck lost all acceleration, and it said warning lights, pull over as soon as you can, and the road and by the hood. We were very surprised and very confused as to what was happening, but we got out and we put every liquid in the vehicle and we poured it on top of the flames in the engine compartment, and it didn't really make any difference. The flames still kept just getting higher and higher, and we were pretty nervous that it would catch on fire. Anna was smart. She went way back, way back, and she took her phone and I were trying to get that to go out because it just kept burning. Finally, 2 people came from the rest stop, and they came up to us, and the one man was very, very wise. He had a big gallon jar of water, but he also had a couple of t-shirts, old t-shirts, and he laid it all on top of what was burning in the engine compartment, and the flames went out. And we were very grateful because we were happy to see that the truck didn't completely burn. And so sometime later, we were on our way home. We had the fire trucks come. We had a tow truck come. This is the way we started out the day, and this is the way we ended the day. We had kind of a bit of a mess going on there. So the tow truck came off to Blind River. We phoned a friend and got somebody that would actually come to almost Iron Bridge and drive us back to Little Current, which we were really grateful for. And in bed that night, I thought, like, you know, I have never bought a new truck, but I had a situation where a family member had just bought this truck, and they had out just after the bill and probably for much longer. They asked me if I'd be willing to take the truck over. They couldn't turn it back at and so they asked me if I'd be willing to take it over. And I didn't really see my path forward, but I thought, you know, if God wants me to do that, if it's a help to them, I'll do it. And it was wonderful because I didn't know then that I'd be moving to Ontario. I didn't know then that I'd be living where I live and that I'd be driving the amount of miles I was driving. When I was in Alberta, we went 3 blocks to church and 4 blocks to work, and that was it. So I certainly didn't need a vehicle like this, but in Ontario it's been very helpful. So I thought, you know, Lord, you gave me this vehicle and now it's not useful. I don't know what it's going to take to repair it. And I was kind of discouraged a little bit. I thought, what is God exactly trying to teach me in this lesson? Well, about 10 days later, July the 18th, I was sitting in my office at work and closed the door and signed something. So I signed it, and then he said it's a non-disclosure agreement. Domtar has decided we're going to be closing the mill in a couple of months, and we need to get, because you're the financial person, we're going to have you work on the financial restructuring. You have to be aware of what's going on. You have to be part of the activity that's going on. And again, your heart sinks. You think, here's 400 people that don't know what's coming. And I don't know what it holds, but it certainly doesn't look good today. And I went home that night and I thought, I don't understand. I didn't really look for that job. I didn't want that job necessarily. But again, it was through a series of what I felt was God's leading that I ended up in that job in Espanola. And I had really enjoyed it. I liked being there. I thought it was wonderful. But then the other part about it is you can't talk to anybody. Everybody's telling you what they're going to do next week, next month, and they're going to buy a house, and they're going to buy a car. Expensive. Oh, it's sit here and know what's going on and not have anybody that you can talk to except for God. You can't talk to your family, you can't talk to your friends, and certainly can't talk to any of your co-workers. So what is God journey. I don't really get it. I just can't quite understand. So a couple of months later, I was getting ready to go on a work trip to South Carolina, and I was again in my office, and Alex called and said, Missy isn't very good. And Missy had been my dog for 13 years, and she was my companion. She walked with me. She did the dishes every night. She would lay beside me whenever I sat down. She'd get under my feet if I was trying to play the piano, and always kind of my shadow. And I really, really had her as a big part of my life for a lot of years. And Alex said, she's just doing very good. I think we should take her to the vet before you leave for your vacation, your trip. So we took her to the vet, and the vet wasn't our normal vet. She doesn't seem too bad. She's an old girl, but, she's not really in too bad of shape. And so I left on this work trip. And if you ever go from Sudbury to North Carolina, you know that there are a lot of stops along the way. It takes a long time. And so I left one evening and got there quite late the next day. And arrived in Charlotte, North Carolina, realized that in Washington, D.C., I'd left my phone in the airport. So you're thinking, I have all these things that I want to coordinate with Alex. I want to make sure I talk to her. I want to make sure that I know what's going on, and I have no communication. I have nothing except my laptop with email when I get connected somewhere. Again, you just get discouraged. You think, how many more things can keep happening? Well, then 2 days later, Alex phoned me and said, through my friend's phone, and said, Missy isn't doing well. She's in great distress. She's not going to survive, and I'm going to take her to tomorrow if we'll make an appointment for her. So again, it was just so discouraging. You think all these things just keep happening, and one of them is kind of confusing, and you wonder just what you're going to learn from it. When you have 3 things that happen in less than 3 weeks, you think, I just don't know. I don't understand what God is trying to teach me. So we felt like we were doing the things, I felt like I was doing the things that God had called me to do. I thought I was following His will for me, and it just felt like the battle kept going, and it was hard to understand. But the Lord gives us strength in our battles, and He tells us not to worry, but to simply depend on Him. There's a way that He wants us to do it. And He says, you're going to have times in your life when you're going through all of these, but you need to go up to God and hold His hand while you're taking care of your responsibilities down here. Talking to God, He leave you of all the things that you have to do. You still have to get your truck fixed. You still have to go all those to find out what's going on there. You still have to, deal with your dog being ill. You still have to deal with all the things that are happening at work. But He's telling you that if you take care of those responsibilities, I'm going to hold your hand throughout it all. It's very true. So when we're in the midst of the battle, there isn't much that we can do except go to God. I'm going to have another slide here. I don't know if you can see that, so if not, maybe Keith, it's Ephesians 6, verse 12.
For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places.
So having said that, what we need to do when we're going through these battles is we need to fight. Understand that we can be sad. We can understand that we're going through something very difficult. We can understand that sometimes it feels like it happens over and over. I think that summer I felt like I was in the season of over and over and over. It just felt like it wasn't going to end. But time to fight. So what we have here in Exodus is we have a war, and it was time for the people of Israel to have fight. Had they fought before after leaving Egypt? Before this was their first fight, but was it their last? We know that they were really in a season of fighting, and people of Israel, as it relates to what we're going through and what we have happening at times. If each one of us could stand up in front and tell our story of things that we're praying for, things that we're going through, that we've got in our life, this service on and on and on, I think it wouldn't end. I'm part of a Bible in our family, and on Sabbath nights it's Alex and I and my adult children and a spouse, so 6 or 7 of us in the Bible that we're going through the Bible. And at the end of it, we go around the group and we what everybody particularly wants to have prayed for them. And then typically my sister will say a prayer. She writes it all down in great detail, and a lot of times there's a lot of detail. We get to the end of the time and she prays for us. And I'll tell you, that's the time that we all really appreciate, because the things that are the most heavy on your heart that week are you have 7 people that are going out that week and they're going to pray for you specifically. And it's something we didn't do before. I mean, I'd pray for my relatives, but I didn't know what they were going through. And so when we have opportunity, we can pray very specifically for my bedridden right now. We can pray very specifically for my nephew's children who he wants to come to the Lord. And that I've really learned from that opportunity that we have. So there are forces that we can't see that are trying to take us. They're trying to discourage us on the path that we're taking in following God's direction. But the worst thing we can do is to tuck tail and run when it's our opportunity to pull down and to open earth. So I don't know if you noticed when Shirley was reading, what does it start? Verse 8. And it's maybe in this version, it might not be in everybody's version, but then, that's right. So what do we know when we hear the word then in a sentence? Came before that. So we have to find out what came before then so that we know and we have a chance to discuss what happens after then. So if we go back to the beginning of chapter 17, I'm sure everybody knows this story. We know that the children of Israel had left Egypt. They had gone through the desert of Sin. They crossed the Red Sea, and now they were getting close to Mount Horeb, and they were being told to camp at Rephidim. So we find they're coming to Rephidim, and what were they planning to do in Rephidim? What did God have them do? On the side here, you can have a bit of a. And so this is Rephidim right here. You can see how they came across the Red Sea. They've traveled a little bit further, and they're planning to camp. Did they need to camp? Did the children of Israel need to camp? Did God know what he was doing? He suggested that they camp. He was giving them a. So if you know that you have a group of 600,000 men, plus all the women and the children, and you're traveling through the Middle East, what do you think? They need to know that that wasn't a small problem, it was a major problem. But not only is this a big problem because you physically need the water, this is up what you expect. God tells you we're going here to camp. God tells you this is what you set up camp right here. And what do you expect? You expect to be resting. That's what Rephidim means, right? Is rest. We're looking for that, yes? Okay. Right. What I read said it means rest. But they were the name. But one of the things you can't do is rest when you're very dehydrated, when you're thirsty. You can't revitalize yourself. But there's not much you can do in that situation except wonder where your water is going to come from. So this happens sometimes when we have something that's going on in our lives, and we think if we could just overcome that one problem, if we could just get that to resolved, that we move on and things. We think that if we just get that new job, we wouldn't have any trouble. If we just had a new would be that way. And we find that we resolve one problem and the next one just gets harder sometimes. So, situation where and get ready to find out where God is taking us, only to find that that's the place where maybe we're fighting our biggest battle and we didn't see it coming. So it messes up our expectations because we think we're resting, and instead sometimes when we think that we're going through just one thing after another, we're thinking, come on, Lord, just give me a break. I just need a break. I want to rest. I want to relax. I want to camp a little bit. I need you to just give me that time. And sometimes it just feels like we don't get that. So if we go back to verses 1, 2, and 3, I don't have these on the screen, we kind of can open our Bibles to them and we can look at that and we just know what's happening in these verses. Did they just decide to come to Rephidim and camp there? Did they just kind of wander around the desert and then finally get to Rephidim and think, you know what, this is a great place. I think we'll have a camp here. God led them and he told them, he said, camp here at Rephidim. They were in living water and they were dehydrated. In John chapter 4, he calls himself the Lord. We're thirsty if he's the living water. Why are we so dehydrated when we're living water? And when we sometimes have the understanding or the doubt or conflict that we're thinking, well, we're just doing what you told us to do. We're not doing anything here that we didn't think you wanted us to do. The people of Israel had no water, thirsty. And what did they do? They started to grumble and complain. And when you read the story, you know that complaining isn't what they should be doing. They should be doing what? Praising God. But they started to grumble. And you think, well, in some ways, I think I maybe can understand a little bit. They were so annoyed at the circumstances that they started to do. Do you remember what they started to do? But they also started to pick up rocks, right? They said, if there's somebody that's responsible for this, we want to find out. You have your children there, you have your animals there, you're trying to rest, you have no water, you get thirsty very quickly in that kind of a situation. And so they said, whose fault do you think this is? But God says that you have to learn in season, out of season, how to trust him. He says, this is what I'm teaching you. It might not be what you want to learn right now, but that's what I'm teaching you. So there were people in chapter 14 who were caught between a rock and a hard place. They were at the Red Sea, right? And what happened? Yeah. We were in chapter 15. They didn't have any water. We're in chapter 16. They needed some. We're in chapter 17 and they didn't have any water. They're thinking, come on, Jesus, what's happening? We're just doing what you tell us to do, and we get to these places where we continue. And the reason this passage speaks to us is because sometimes our life feels the same way. It feels like we just don't understand. We don't know what's happening. We're just doing what he asked us to do, and it's confusing. Sometimes we read the story of the people of Israel, and what do we make? Judge them a little bit. We think, man, you just had a miracle. Just last chapter. Like, what's going on here? You just had that happen to you. And I know sometimes if we go through things like this ourselves, we see God's leading in something, not we can see another problem and think, but how is God going to solve this one? Yes, Miles? At least they didn't right then, right? It doesn't seem like, and that's the same for us sometimes too. We think we're going through this, you're bringing me here, but is we need to ask. Thank you for that. No, I think the blessing's here. It's a little bit of a hard to see, but I think the blessing's here. And then they came through the wilderness. That is, I think it's just pointing to that spot on the route. It's not probably a perfect map, but it's the biggest one I could find, so that's what I was using. So we wondered sometimes how come they come to the point where they're complaining, but then we know too that sometimes when we're in the same situation, we have a few words of complaint. And not that we should, because we need to trust, and as Miles said, we need to just ask for help. So in most of them picking up the rocks and knowing that they're thirsty, he said, what am I to do, Jesus? I know you don't want to let us die here. Can you do something about it? People are thirsty. You told us to camp here, and things are looking bad. We're on our way to the promised land, and here we're at a breaking point. They were thirsty and they didn't past it, and they started asking, is the Lord with us or is he not? And I know sometimes you ask the question, is real, to help us, but sometimes you wonder, is he with me right now? Is he helping me right now at this time? And they were asking that question, and at that point in time Moses got what? He got word from the Lord, and it said, go up onto Mount Horeb. Relationship with the Lord, but he also had what, close to 2 million people that were in front of him that were hungry and thirsty, and they're looking for water desperately, and they're trying to find it. And so Moses got the word from the Lord. He said, go up to Mount Horeb and take what with him? the staff of God. And so he was to bring the power of heaven to their experience here on earth. And he said, I need you to strike the rock, and when you do, water will come out of it, so the nations will no longer thirst. Have you ever experienced that when you're going through something like this, you can get right to the breaking point, and you're just at the end of your ability to manage, and then what happens? God comes through? I think sometimes we'd like him to come a little bit before that. But what he wants is, when we're taking this journey, he's wanting to ready us for where he's doing. That's another timeline. It shows that there was 22 there, I think, from crossing the Red Sea until they came to. So that's about the timeline between those points in time. So here we have a text. It's Hebrews 11, and maybe stand with that.
And Sandra, you were correct.
Oh, good. Okay.
I looked that up.
Thank you.
But without faith it is impossible to please him. For he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him.
Right on. Thank you. So as it says that he's readying us for the journey, and he needs us to trust him so that we can continue on the journey. Sometimes when we're in that phase, we're just saying, I'm thirsty. Is any provision coming from anywhere? So now we have Isaiah 40:31. This is actually the one I've read for scripture reading, but we'll get Cindy to read that if you don't mind. I think I have it on here too. Yeah.
But those who wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles.
What does it say about those who wait? Doesn't say anything, does it? But I think we want to be the one who wait on the Lord. And sometimes it's possible that, you think, maybe I'll just go back to my old way of life, or my old thinking, or my old way of operating, because I'm not getting any provisions over here. But don't forget that in chapter 14, you were between a rock and a hard place, and the sea opened up. In chapter 15, you needed water, and it was provided. In chapter 16, you were hungry, and manna fell from heaven. Chapter 17, why are you? The enemy is so good at getting us to focus so hard on our problems that we don't know how big and how great God is. We are so quick to forget. So what happened after Moses? Yeah, they had water, all the water they needed, right? And they were happy. Can you imagine at that point? They must have thought it was the most special water ever. And just as they're getting all their containers and they're filling them up and they're ready to go, really read in verse 8. Then came, and did Amalek come to help them? Their first fight, their first war, their first battle. Do you think they've been trained in Egypt to fight battles? Do you think anybody wants their slaves to be trained as soldiers? Probably not. In this situation, we'd be thinking, what's happening, Jesus? We just need a break. We just got water. We just are ready to get rest and relaxed and rejuvenated. I know you don't owe me anything, Jesus. I'm just trying to do what you asked me to do. I just need a break. And your word allows me to believe that it'll happen. We're back to you. And this is what happens. So many of us can feel for the children of Israel. It's just one thing after another. And the other thing is not only it's just one thing after another, but it's one thing after another in Rephidim. And what that means is sometimes you're in a location that's still the same location. So you have the same job with the same problems. You have the same coworker. You have the same sickness. You have the same family strife. You have the same issues. And you think, have you ever thought, if I could only get rid of this one thing, then I'd be okay? Again, we just think, I just need to get through this problem and then things will get better. That's what the people of Israel facing. They thought that just when they got water that they'd be able to take this rest and that they would move on. And then came Amalek. And what makes it worse is that the people of Israel were fighting against Amalek. And who was he? I know somebody can tell me this very, very carefully. Amalek is whose grandson? Esau's grandson? And Esau's brother was Jacob, who had his name changed to Israel. So here's Amalek. He's Jacob's great nephew, and the people of Israel have to fight against him. So they were saying, you mean we have to fight against our own bloodline? We have to fight against our own people? We often think that the people who are around us are supposed to push us forward. We think that those people are the ones that are going to carry us to better things and to help us when we're in trouble. And sometimes they're the very ones who are holding us back. That's generally what it says in Deuteronomy, I think 25. It says that he took the tail of the line and of the line of people, and who's usually at the back of the line of people, not the strongest and not the most leader, right? Yes. No mercy. That's right. And they were very, if you read about them, they were very tough fighters. They lived off of just chasing people down in the desert and taking their things away from them. So here they had a big group of 2 million people that had all their things with them coming out of Egypt, and he took the opportunity that he had to attack them from the rear, as Miles said. Yes. And God's people were trying to just go to the promised land, right? And so he's attacking them, and they're under great stress. And you think he's preparing us for a great promise, and that promise sometimes grows dim. We think the promised land is coming, but we need it sooner than later because we don't want to be fighting here in the desert, especially, like you say, attacked from the rear, so you're most vulnerable or attacked. But he's preparing us for a great promise, and that promise, remember just how great God is. If we don't stop walking, sometimes we will experience where he is taking us through that battle. If you remember back in the 1990s, electricity was starting to get expensive, and people often found their electricity bills to be very high. So one of the things a lot of public buildings did is they would put in motion detector lighting so that when somebody was in the room, the lights would come on, and when there was nobody in the room, the lights would go off. So what they had is detectors at the floor level, and when they'd see movement on the ground, the power would go on, and when there was no movement on the ground, the power would go off. So the experience of power is contingent upon the experience of the movement. If there's no movement on the ground, there's no power in the air. And it's not because there isn't any power available, it's because there's no movement on the ground. The power responds to the movement. So there is a battle that has to be fought, and there's a victory that has to be won. And sometimes you might say, well, I'm waiting on God to tell me what to do. And I think sometimes God is saying, but I'm waiting on you to keep walking. I'm waiting on you to start this fight. And who has more time than us? We want to keep moving. When we have something here below that we need to take care of, we need to pray to God, reach out for it, and then keep moving. He's saying there's a battle that has to be fought. We have to be responsible. We can't complain about it. We have to get busy and fight that battle. So in Moses in verse 9, can you read again, maybe Lenny? Or Jesse? Sorry, in verse 9. I don't have it up here. And I'm sorry. I'll give you a minute to look it up. It's chapter 17 and verse.
And Moses said unto Joshua, "Choose us out then, and go out, fight with Amalek to morrow. I will stand on the top of the hill, the rod of God in mine hand."
So Moses went up to the mountain, and Joshua went down to the people, himself an army to go and fight that battle. Not much. You would end up with a lot of stress if you ignored that battle. But he had his hand up because he knew that his hand was up to God, with Moses being at the top of the mountain. And so it says, if you take care of that responsibility, I'm not going to let you down alone. I'm going to go up to the top of the mountain and handle the spiritual warfare. Because what happens up there determines what happens down here. If you're keeping your mind only what's up above, something used on earth, do the work. So when we're going through a battle, pity help us. We need warriors. That's how we're going to win the war, with the staff of God. And we believe it can be done, but it's not smart to take the journey by yourself without having a hold of your Father up above. We have a strong confidence in our Father that even though we know we still have to take this walk on earth, that He is going to be there for us. We still have to be responsible. We still need to follow the protocol or the remedies or the tasks or the jobs that we need to do that are available to us here on earth. But Moses said to Joshua, "You go down while I go up with the staff of God in my hand." One observation here is, did Moses go up to the top of the mountain by himself? What would have happened if he would have gone to the top of the mountain by himself? He would have needed some help. Sorry? Yeah, and what happened, we know the story, but as we go, we'll find out what happened when he got tired. But sometimes there's a lesson to be had in this for us, maybe, in ourselves in a battle. And I know when I was going through that summer, I don't think I asked anybody for help. It was very much. The thing is, you just down, hunker down, and I'll get this sorted out. You know, before too long, it'll be fixed. But one thing I found is that even if they're strangers, you can count on the most surprising people that help you through. And for me, one of the things, and I don't want to make this a long story, but one of the things that happened is, it was a Chrysler Canada issue, of course, and it had been a recall that I had missed because I moved and missed the recall. And during COVID, I guess I just never got into a dealership with the truck. And when I phoned the dealership in Espanola, they said, "What do you want us to do about it? There's nothing we can do. You have to figure that out on your own." And the tow truck driver was so kind, you know. He phoned me and he said, "You know, I think you need to take it somewhere else." He said, "In my experience, the people in the Sioux are very, very helpful." He said, "Why don't you take it there? I'm already going to call them and let them know that you're coming and that you're going to be, or that you're going to be them. And I think they might be able to help you." So by the time I phoned them, they already had a plan. I told the Chrysler Canada and really say that they thought that I some help from them, which ended up, he fought that battle for 6 months, getting those parts in, to pay about 2/3 of the repair. And when I got that truck back, it was new, and I was so grateful for it. You don't know that you're not help you that you don't even expect. But I think more than anything, we need to know that we have the right people about us. And that's maybe what I want to talk about a little bit more than that. We know that when we need some help, what did the Moses and what did when Moses got tired? What did they do? They sat him down. They got him a rock. So you know you have the right people around you when they give you a rock to sit on, right? Are you sitting on something that's going to go away or that's going to fall apart? You're sitting on something that's solid. We know what the rock represents. But when you see people are holding up while they're going through a battle, and you think to yourself, aren't they going through a battle? I thought they were in a war. Yes, but I'm sitting on the rock. Our faith is in one thing, and it's in that rock. And I believe in it, and I have an expectation because it's a rock. Even when I fall apart, it doesn't. It's immutable. It isn't going to change. It doesn't matter what you're feeling because you're sitting on a rock. Sometimes when it feels like you're losing your ability to keep going, remember that God is teaching you that you need to return to the rock. If it's getting hard, and around you that can give you that rock. So I think we have a little bit of reading to do here. Can you read that, Lenny? It's just a little bit of a, I don't know if you can read it. Just to about the middle of the page there.
So Moses' hand got heavy, and his man got him a rock to sit, and they held up his hand on one side, the other on the other, and because of them, not just Moses, his hand were steady until sunset. Thus we know what happened. Joshua overwhelmed Amalek with the edge of the sword, and we want to take the flag and put it in the ground and said, "The Lord is my banner."
So going back, thank you. And going You can see Moses there. He's getting both of his arms held up. Have you ever tried to hold your arms up for a long time? Very heavy, very quickly. I know one time my dad came to one place where we lived, trying to finish the basement for us. He was 80, and my son was 25, and I was aged at that point in time. And he said, you know, I'll do the drywalling, but to do the ceiling. Of course, it's hard to do the ceiling, you know, especially when you're 80 years old. So one day he said, Sunday I'm going to do the ceiling, and I'd like it if you would both give me a hand. Of course, we said, for sure, you don't have to do anything. You cut the pieces, you tell us what to do, we'll hold them up, we'll drill them and everything. Long before Nathan and I were both sitting in a chair, my dad was holding them up and doing the work. He had done it all his life, and he had methods, and he had plans, and he was strong, and he could hold his arms up. But even so, his arms got heavy, and he had asked for help. So what did we read in Ephesians 6? I can't remember who read Ephesians 6, but what did it say in there? And a little later, what does it say about the armor that we have? We know that passage probably from memory. What is the only offensive that we have in that armor? Is it the helmet? The breastplate? What is the offensive weapon? The Spirit. So sometimes when we're going through things like that, we have to get away from playing defense, and we have to play offense. We have to have that sort of God in our head that can win our battle. So because he says it, we need to do it. We need to have the expectation that Jehovah Nissi will give us the victory. In my life and in our family's life, we're always looking for the victory, aren't we? And why will we have the victory? I think Miles said it, because we have a rock. We can have an expectation that even though we have battles, God is only preparing us for a great promise. Are we ready for that battle? It's time to play. Because he said it, we need to do it. And when we do it, we know that the lights will come on.